Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today, and welcome to part one of our short and sweet webinar series for the eXact. Today, we'll be talking about the differences between legacy devices and the eXact. Presenting today is Richard Gray, a solution architect at X-Rite Pantone. I'm Robert Grotan, the Global Technical Marketing Manager, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Just a few things to go over before we get started. Due to the number of people that are attending today's webinar, we will keep everyone muted. If you have any questions, please use the questions function on the GoToWebinar panel. We'll have time to answer a few of your questions at the end of this webinar. And if we don't get to your question, we'll definitely be sure to follow up. Finally, this webinar will be recorded and you'll receive a link so that you can review the webinar at your convenience. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rich to kick things off.
Robert, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this first of a four-part series, what we like to call a short and sweet webinar series. We'll appreciate that a lot of people are working from home these days, and we'd like to then get this webinar started. And as I say, this is one of a short and sweet webinar series. So we would aim this to be no more than 10 to 15 minutes of your time. Okay. First topic is really just the differences between any legacy spectrophotometers you may be using within your organization and the X-Rite eXact. The webinar itself is purposely quite generic, showing some of the key features of the eXact, and in the coming webinar series we're going to expand on some of these in a bit more detail. So for those of you not familiar with the eXact device, it's one of the most popular devices that X-Rite sell. It's widely placed in the graphic arts market. Okay. The device itself comes in a range of different aperture or measurement sizes, right down to a 1.5 millimeter spot measurement area. We find this is a very popular device. This is widely used in pre-press or customer scenarios, which allows a measurement of a very small color sample or color chip which may be supplied to a converter or a pre-press company for color evaluation. Okay. Previously, that would be purely a visual evaluation only to a Pantone guide or customer's own fan deck, where the assessment of the color may be more difficult or impractical. The aperture's guide ranges from 1.5 millimeters, as I mentioned, right the way through to a much larger spot size of 6 millimeters, which is typically used in press production environments such as the corrugated industry. The go-to aperture is typically the 2 millimeter device. This style then allows flexibility between minimum patch size, which may be generic on printed material, through to different plate types which you may be using. Another key benefit of the device over legacy instrumentation is that there's no separate calibration tile or shoe with the device itself. The calibration tile is actually integrated into the handset device, and this allows for two main benefits. Firstly, the tile can't be lost or damaged easily. And secondly, the device will actually self-calibrate when powered on every 16 hours. Okay, this then doesn't require any operator interaction apart from a very short button press on the touchscreen device, which you can see on the left-hand side. You can also then configure supporting software not to have a calibration prompt in the software itself. Again, just speeding up the operator process and the simplicity for the operator. The calibration tile also acts as a dust cover to protect the optics from any dust or debris which may be collected on the devices in a press room type area. The handheld device itself on the eXact allows for numerous different configuration windows, and we're going to look at those in some detail in future webinars. Just to give you some of the key likely benefits to possibly in your workflow. Here we can see a couple of different screenshots on the bottom of this particular slide. What the eXact device can do is firstly give you the closest match to a particular house or Pantone color and give you an overall color difference, of course. But secondly, and without having to measure the same sample numerous times, it will also give you an indication of whether that sample is also a good match under different lighting conditions. This is very important for certain workflows where something might be in a point of sale scenario but being evaluated under a different light source. So within a couple of button clicks, you can clearly see whether incoming samples, which may be from different converters or suppliers, could potentially give us a mismatch in a point of sale or production environment. Again, this can be built into different screen views or even tolerances within the handheld device itself. One of the benefits of the eXact over, again, legacy devices is the use of multiple what we call M conditions or measurement conditions. These are then typically used in various print standards, for example, the ISO series of standards, where a different M condition measurement may be specified to otherwise a current workflow. The newer models will also allow simultaneous measurement of all four measurement conditions within a single measurement read. This then allows the operator or converter to choose which one they want to report on. A couple of examples here. You may have a legacy workflow where all of your measurements and color data is in the M0 condition, but you may be interested in measuring densities in the M3 or polarized condition. The software behind the eXact then can filter out and display measurement conditions in specific modes as required. The other benefit for this for updated ISO standards is also that you may want to report certain measurement conditions in M0 for, again, legacy measurements, but newer ISO standards require measurement conditions in M1 to perhaps minimize the effect of optical brightness on certain paper stocks. Again, this can all be done in a single read. A lot of these conditions are upgradable directly in the field through the eXact Manager supporting software. And again, we're going to cover that in a later webinar. The eXact, a little bit like your smartphone, has a fully touchscreen display. Okay, you will get individual numerical results, but also, as you can see on the left hand side, you will get a graphical display. It's very useful for operators who may or may not be able to diagnose color difference purely by numbers, and you can clearly see which area of the color spectrum you're in and what sort of differences you may be getting between standard and trial. Okay. We also have in later firmware releases what we call a quick read or a quick start menu. This allows very simple and straightforward density or tonal value measurements. It also then allows a very simple quick read where I can simply measure two samples against each other and get a very quick and simple color comparison. The enhanced mode, which again we'll cover in the later webinar in more detail, allows for customization of any of the workflows and icons on the device in terms of specification, naming, and also overall pass file. As part of the device suite, what you also get in the complementary software eXact Manager is access to all of the latest Pantone color libraries. This is now free of charge through what we call the Pantone Live default user access, and you then get digital libraries of the latest Pantone version 4 releases, which contain all of the latest colors in the Pantone Fandex from 2019. These are now a total of 2,140 colors, and it includes the new 296 colors released back in September last year. To synchronize your device with the latest libraries, you simply download them to the supporting software, and it's a simple drag and drop process onto the device. It takes a couple of minutes, no more. This allows for accurate digital reproduction of colors to Pantone, closest color search, etc. Of course, your own legacy libraries and measurement of your own samples are also all supported. In terms of functionality, again, one of the most widely used functions on the eXact to date is probably what we call the best match function. And again, we're going to cover this in a little bit more detail in some of the later webinars. In short, what it would provide the operator or prepress company or end user is an estimation of if a color was incorrect, where approximately is this error coming from? Is it simply that the color is simply too dark or too light to the standard? Or do we have some sort of underlying color issue with either substrate or ink mix? The best match procedure will give you an estimation of if one of these was to be adjusted, what is the likely difference in color that I could expect? Very popular function. It saves a lot of press time. Again, we'll be covering this in a little bit more detail later. And finally, in terms of functionality when supporting software is also included, there's a couple of main benefits here. The device can be supplied with a full Bluetooth setup, so we can have full wireless contact into both PC and Mac applications. This then also lends itself to numerous benefits in terms of some of our software suites, for example, ColorCert, Color IQC Print, for example. There's also third-party support and numerous other software packages. What this also allows you to do with the supporting scan functionality is we can then scan a full color bar configured either directly in the software or legacy, and the reporting software suite such as ColorCert or IQC Print can then report on all color measurements within a single scan function. The device also supports what we call XRGA color standard, which underpins all of our Pantone Live standards, which is the accepted standard within graphic arts in terms of color reproduction. What can also be done is any legacy data can also be converted to this standard. This would then ensure good compatibility into the both Pantone and legacy data workflows. Finally, we just wanted to make you aware of numerous different links that are available. Just to give you a bit of explanation here, the top link here, which will be posted to you, simply gives you our website link into all of the eXact family and also different functionality that we described on this webinar. What you will also have access to is during this lockdown period, we also are giving free of charge access into a full course called Understanding the Numbers of Color. It's basically an online fundamentals of color course, which you can register for free of charge, and you would have, once registered, up to 2 months to complete all of the different sections. Very useful course, will really help you in the understanding of a lot of the metrics that the eXact and a lot of the X-Rite softwares use. And on that note, thank you very much for your time. I'd like to hand back over to Robert for any questions
Great.
that you might have.
Yes, thank you, Rich. If you have a question that you haven't submitted and you'd like to submit one, feel free to do so now. We'll look through here, some of the questions and answer a few of them. So I have one here right now. When using multiple measurement modes, such as in scanning, is M1 still conforming to Part 1 of ISO 13655?
In short, yes. Specifically on that topic, and again, we'll probably cover this in a future webinar as well, is that all eXact from, I believe, serial number 29,000 and above have this functionality included by default. Legacy devices can be upgraded through our service department to give you this dual scan functionality of M0 and M1 at the same time. For example, pieces of software like eXact Auto Scan do require this functionality to be enabled on your instrument. If you're just using a single measurement, though, any serial number can be used.
Great. Are there any more questions? I'll give everyone some time. Looks like there's another one coming in. Is the eXact used outside the print business? Example, construction products?
Yes, we've had, I mean, to be fair, the majority of the sales are in the print business, but we have numerous customers using it for certain textiles workflows, for example, measurements of fluorescence. We also have numerous people using it for measurements of incoming plastics, and also we have it used in certain car component workflows as well, whereas 045 geometry is required. So yes, it's for the aperture size as well. It lends itself to obviously the measurements of smaller samples as well, but you can also set the instruments up to do averaging. So if you're measuring a larger part, you can take 3 or 5 readings and average that out into one result.
Question on just clarifying legacy devices. What are we talking about when we talk legacy devices? Is this including the Spectro Eye? What other devices are we looking at?
Where it's typically for X-Rite products, then we would probably be saying things like the Spectro Eye, the 962 series, although that still is an active device, but its functionality is far less than the eXact. And probably the 500 series for those of you in North America who are familiar with those devices as well. So probably they're the 3 main X-Rite or Gretag Macbeth badge devices, but there are numerous examples of other competitive instruments which we've upgraded other customers from to the eXact.
We'll take one more question for today. Can you advise on aperture size? So I think someone's asking, what is the most common aperture size? Is there some kind of best practices to use?
Yes, in general, and unfortunately we have to generalize a little bit with that sort of question. In my experience, if you're printing flexible packaging, or what we call primary packaging, so typically printing on plastic films, etc., typically they use a higher screen count, in which case a 2mm device is normally used pretty much across the board. If you're using or printing on what we would term secondary packaging, so paper printing, corrugated board, etc., usually a 4mm device is preferred, just because of the slightly irregular nature of the substrate and being able to then capture a lower screen count. So either 2 or 4mm are typical. 6mm devices less widely used, but some industrial applications will also specifies 6 millimeters just for the measurement spot area being larger. And finally, the 1.5 millimeter instrument, which we mentioned at the start of the webinar, is typically used in a scan function where they're looking to print commercial or packaging offset and don't have the budget or requirement for a full automated scan device such as the IntelliTrax 2, but then they will need the smaller aperture device to conform to their current setup of color bars. So they couldn't change the size or dimensions of the color bars, so they get the instrument to fit what they currently have.
Perfect, thank you. So this was meant to be a short and sweet webinar, so we will stop here for today. Again, there are a few questions we didn't get to. I'll gather those and I can send them to Rich and we can follow up with you offline. Again, part 2 in this series will be next week, Thursday, April 23rd. So it's titled How to Maximize the Use of eXact. If you haven't signed up yet, please, you may want to do so. So with that, we'll end here. Again, thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Rich, for presenting, and have a great day.
Thanks everyone. Take care.